Thank you, Steve. Hola, buenas tardes. It's just so delightful to join the wave after tuning to songs of love, columpiándose, and just engaging in times of writing. So that was fantastic. So creo que as we understand the system, only the person that speaks shows in the large screen. So I think we all are going to go real quick to say our names so that at least you see us visually, and then we get going from that. So mi nombre es Marcela Polanco.
My name is Ron Deming.
My name is Rachel Ramos.
And I'm Christina.
My name is Ellie Berg.
Wal, everyone. My name is Tisha. And just so you know, Wal is a greeting in Zapoteco, which is my grandparents' and father's indigenous language from Oaxaca, Mexico.
Okay, awesome. So at least you can see all of us. So we are going to start by doing a land acknowledgement to honor and pay respect to the indigenous peoples of the geographical area where we are, which is in San Diego, California, in la Costa Pacifica de Estados Unidos. And we do that also to honor the enduring relationships with the peoples and ancestral territories. We recognize this land as a land of the Kumeyaay. So this land acknowledgement was written by Kumeyaay people, the community of the Kumeyays, Mike Connolly, Mithwish, and it reads, "We stand upon a land that carries the footsteps of millennia of Kumeyaay people. They are a people whose traditional lifeways intertwine with the worldview of earth and sky in a community of living beings. This land is part of a relationship that has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced the Kumeyaay people of the present day. It is part of a worldview founded in the harmony of the cycles of the sky and balance in the forces of life. For the Kumeyaay, red and black represent the balance of those forces that provide for harmony within our bodies as well as the world around us. We acknowledge this legacy from the Kumeyaay. We promote this balance in life as we pursue our goals of knowledge and understanding. We find inspiration in the Kumeyaay spirit to open our minds and hearts. It is the legacy of the red and black. It is the land of the Kumeyaay. Eyay Ohun, my heart is good." We also would like to acknowledge Steve and the team behind the scenes of Narrative Initiatives for the tremendous work in setting this up. My goodness. We only got a little bit of the emails of what I imagine are the thousands of conversations that happen behind this. Fantastic that this content helps us to connect us through the storytelling in more tangible ways. So how we agreed to organize the form of this hour is that Christina, Ron, and myself as co-hosts, we will introduce ourselves briefly. Then the three of us will introduce our guest storytellers. And then the three storytellers, Tisha, Rachel, and Ellie, will share the stories. And then at the end, we will respond to the stories. So we will keep track of time and we'll see how that goes. So I guess I'll start. All right, somebody else would like to introduce themselves, Christina and Ron, and then I go last.
Okay, my name again is Ron Deming. I am a very recent graduate with a Master of Science in Counseling from San Diego State University. It's so good to be done. And I am so thrilled and honored and feel so privileged to be part of this Storython. There is something indescribably wonderful about the awareness of this connection across the entire globe. And so what a thrill to be part of this, and thanks for allowing me to be here today.
And hello, again, my name is Christina. I'm an almost graduate of the MFT program at San Diego State. I'm currently finishing out my traineeship at License to Freedom, where we work with immigrants and refugees that experience domestic violence. And I am very honored to be here hosting. Thank you.
Mi nombre es Marcela Polanco, soy colombiana de Bogotá, llevo viviendo en Estados Unidos hace 20 años. Hablo Spanglish, colombiano inmigrante, tengo influencias africanas, indígenas y europeas. Estoy conectada con el grupo de hoy a través de mis condiciones como inmigrante, como terapeuta familiar y a través de la Universidad San Diego State University, en donde nos conocimos. Okay, so I will introduce Tisha, who will be the first storyteller. So I've met Beatriz Cristina Morales Bazan 2 years ago when I came to be part of the team of marriage and family therapy at San Diego State University. And through these 2 years, knowing Beatriz at first, I came to know her to different variations of our collaboration in many different ways. So then I got to know her as Betty, and now more recently, I know her as Tisha. So Tisha, as she mentioned earlier, is her Zapoteco name. Tisha has introduced me to unimaginable worlds de diferentes tejidos desde sus ancestros zapotecos. Tisha se identifica como la única hija de inmigrantes de Ocotlán y Cimatlán, Oaxaca, con ascendencia zapoteca. She's the daughter of the clouds, given her deeply rooted connection to her Zapoteco ancestry. Zapotecos are the indigenous peoples of Oaxaca, Mexico, known as the people of the clouds. They have existed for the past 3,000 years. Como queer, como parte de la clase laboral, como mujer chicana y por primera vez como terapeuta, she is a borderland Chicana. Spanish is her first language, although it's not always the language that she defaults to. And she speaks Spanglish dialect that she inherited from Oaxaca, Mexico, and then made her own here in San Diego.
Thank you, Marcela, for that introduction. So as I was thinking about what story to share with you all today, I was visited by the memory of a conversation I once had with my Huita. Huita is what I call my grandmother. In this conversation, I recalled that she shared with me her experience of first migrating from San Pedro Martir, a small pueblito in Ocotlán, Mexico, to Encinitas, which is a city in San Diego County, about 40 miles north of the border that separates Mexico and the United States. So I called my Huita yesterday and asked her if she remembered sharing the story with me, and if we could chat a bit more about it. At this point, is it imperative that I acknowledge that my conversation with my Huita was entirely in Spanish. Thus, I will be attempting to translate what occurred within our conversation here with you today. I told her all about how I was going to storytell with you all, and how with her permission, I would share a bit of our conversation. She agreed, as she jokingly said that she had quite a bit of time on her hands, thus she could somehow find the time to chat. My Huita crossed into the United States in 1989, which after a little bit of math on both our ends, we determined that meant she was 39 years old. My Huita shared with me that when she first came to the United States, she did not leave her house for about 2 months because she was afraid of La Migra. La Migra is what she and many other people call the Border Patrol in Spanish here in San Diego. She was constantly fearful that Border Patrol would take her into the corralón, or corral, or detention center, or dump her in some random place in Mexico, leaving her to find her own way back home to Oaxaca, or back to her husband and children, now in the United States. We then talked about her experiences of quarantining, because of Border Patrol and because of COVID. She said that this time it seemed a bit different. It was more dangerous because you could lose your life. COVID for her meant entering into a battle for your life. I then asked her if she had ever heard about stories of people losing their lives at the hands of Border Patrol. She said only on TV had she seen that Border Patrol killed people, but that on TV they always said it was because the person ran or because they were aggressive, but that she thinks sometimes Border Patrol does things when they get angry. We then talked about the similar desperation felt in both instances by not being able to go outside and do things. But this time she said that with COVID it was easier. That when she first migrated here, she felt trapped. She could not get used to it. She could not get used to being fearful and unhappy all of the time because she had to stay inside and was not able to be free because of the fear of being taken by Border Patrol. So much so that she kept telling my Huito that she wanted to go back to Oaxaca every day for a year until he agreed. She was in Oaxaca for about 3 months, at which point my Huito called her to let her know that her immigration paperwork had come back. So she came back in 1991 and has resided here in San Diego for the past 29 years. She said that coming back with papers meant she didn't have to fear Border Patrol or stay inside, that she was now safe. I share with you all this story because I think about how we here in San Diego, in the United States, and in the world are freaking out and at our wits' end about certain realities that have existed within different communities for countless years. That rebellion silence in the shadows of the periphery of existence. I think about the resistance that has been written in the soil, that has been passed down through stories like the ones we are all sharing here today. I share with you all this story because it is the story of my Huita. It is the story of my family, my ancestors, and of countless other people whose stories have become faceless, stories we have become blind and deaf to. Stories that are actually not silent in the shadows if you learn to listen differently. Because once you do, those stories become unified cries of nothing more and nothing less than humanity itself. And that's it for me, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Gracias, Tisha. So, vamos a responder to ahora, Tisha. We're going to respond to her, right? Yes. Sorry, I forgot the plan. So I'll go first. Tisha, when I heard, even though you were talking about your Huita, I could not hear the distinction between who was your Huita and who was Tisha, because they're in the story. I see you in many different ways in the stories that you just shared about her. And maybe it is the position of resistance. So you're learning about the history of your Huita in 1989, being home sheltered. And I appreciate that making more overt and more visible that what we, like the whole entire world is living now, is not new, right? It's not a new event, even though we experience it as unique, but many of us and many of the Huitas in the world have lived home sheltered as a response of many sort of viruses, many representations of COVIDs that are racism, sexism, and different experiences of oppression that have sheltered us. And so your response of your Huita of wanted to go back to Mexico, it made me consider about the responses of resistance is how do we yearn to go back to livable worlds, right? And it's quite interesting that in your story, things were como patas arriba, upside down, like the safe place was Mexico and not the so-called land of opportunity, right? Here is the land which she ended up being home sheltered. So how do we consider acts of resistance as a way to migrate back or forward or sideways to worlds that are livable, and that we can take a stance to representations of being la migra or being COVID or any other representations of oppression or discrimination. So I think it's an opportunity that these unfortunate circumstances and COVID has made visible the patterns of the patterns that have led us, many of us, to live in home sheltered ways, in many different ways. So I'm kind of resonating very, very strongly about that. So yes, so I'll leave it there if Christina and Ron would like to share some thoughts.
Other than the simple fact that the story very strongly resonates, the very strange time that we're living in and the difficulties that accompany that, I think that it's good to always keep in the front of our thinking the struggles that people experience and undergo, so that we always have in our mind when we're helping others that they are having experiences and feeling difficulty and facing obstacles that we may not be facing, or that we may be facing together at the same time, or even simultaneously, but to always keep that at the forefront of our thinking so that we can better identify with the experiences of others. Other than the more just really simple connection that I made, that I just think that it's very touching that there's a connection that's maintained between the generations. I think that there's something about being able to identify and carry on the history of a culture, and that you maintain connection with your Zapoteco origins is really awesome. For some reason that just touches me. I think that's really cool. So I appreciated that part a lot.
And for me, as I was hearing this, I was reflecting on how privileged my family's immigration here is in comparison. And yet also I was relating to the fact that, like, when my mother was still here, she would always have this longing for home, although she was home. Like, and that sense of home was something else. So I was really relating to that. Thank you, Tisha.
I want to add a little piece as well, Tisha, that you are, in my judgment, beautifully illustrating, is the importance of translating the South to the North, because you started saying that you had a conversation with your Wita that happened in Spanish, and then you're translating, migrating the knowledges of your Wita that belong to a non-English world to bring it into an English world in order to consider home shelteredness from a different vantage point, right? That it was the experience of your Wita that took place in Spanish. So they belong to that experience, but now you're sharing with us in English her knowledge. So I appreciate it very much. I also appreciate very much that you brought her with you in this context, so that your Wita, through our connection here, can also contribute significantly. which is beautiful. I just wanted to reflect on that. And so I'm not sure if Rachel and Ellie would have also, if you want to add something, or I'm not sure. Just want to open that option.
I just wanted to reiterate something from the chat, that I think there's something significant in the, it's not super distinct who's speaking. And I think there's something honoring connection to ancestors in that. At least that's how I perceived it in hearing that. That sometimes when it comes to folks in different generations from ourselves, that there are these like pieces that resonate, that they become a part of ourselves. So I thought that was really touching to see that kind of blend and not be super clear, that not everything has to be so delineated in the voices of where we come from and the people we come from.
I'll also echo that same thing. I was wondering if others, and I was feeling an appreciation for that chat about the distinction. And I just really appreciate the candor in which, Tisha, you were speaking to your story. I liked the way you were holding the space. It just felt very intimate and personal in the way that you were inviting us into an intergenerational shared experience. So thank you for that.
Wow, everyone. Thank you for your reflections and comments. They made my heart smile. And I'll definitely be sharing them with my Wita. A ver qué dice. Let's see what she says. And oh goodness, I feel like I could just keep talking and talking about this with you all, but I'm definitely excited to hear also the stories of Rachel and Ellie. So turn it back to y'all. Thank you, everyone.
So to the next story then. I have to say that having the opportunity to introduce Rachel makes my heart happy. We have, the two of us, shared a lot of experiences in the last 2 years. We've become colleagues, become family. Well, I could go on and on about that as well, but I do want to tell you a couple of things about Rachel before I introduce them completely to the story, and that is a little bit of information. Rachel is genderqueer Filipino, born in New York, but we're reminding you all that we're streaming from San Diego. They are a recent Master of Science in Marriage and Family Therapy grad from San Diego State University. They are a sex worker rights advocate, as well as a sex educator and a writer. And as I say, I am so thrilled and honored to introduce them to you. So here's Rachel.
Thank you, Ron, for introducing me, Marcella for facilitating this, and Stephen and all else who have organized this. I wanted to give like a little bit of wording. I have some lights that will be changing. They're not flashing when I start sharing the story, just as a heads up for folks who are light sensitive. And I'll begin. I'm just gonna set this here. And let's see, where to begin? Well, I find myself continually gravitating toward the idea of time, compelled to capture something about this abstraction. And as perceptibly fixed and quantifiably constant the space between second, minute, years may be, what I notice more in others and in myself is how time flexes, melts, flies, snaps, breaks, and changes for each of us uniquely. Measures of time are as subjective as how we react to and feel the time being measured. And sheltering in place, quarantine, isolation, are the words we call the time space dedicated to this hibernation, the struggles and the shedding of versions of ourselves to make way to emergent newness, to sit in the vat of time space and consider the iterations of ourselves neither prophesied nor dreamed about, versions of self not yet written. To shelter has become all at once, a roof over our heads, as well as a surreal echo chamber of past, present, future, unvoiced, voiced fears, holding on with a mottled knuckle grip to the here and now. And they say, let us speak, shout, whisper into your ear. They say, don't you want to hold on to this fear, anxiety, and the down, down blanket that has been here for you all this time? After all, it's more familiar perhaps than hope, safer perhaps than something different that has yet to be born to thought, they say. And we strain to hear beyond those words, through the noise and the familiar distraction of doubt, to catch the voice of the unvoiced hopes and dreams, to take a chance, maybe to listen beyond just hearing it, to sense it, not just with ears that strain to hear beyond the knots in the stomach, the thickness in the throat, and the wet weight behind eyes. As the forever song, I am alone, makes both time and self ooze, melt, snap, break, and change. Ears do itch to catch new refrains. I am alone. I feel alone. I feel alone and see aloneness taking residence in faces known and familiar. And perhaps that voice might sound closer to our own than we realize. And it dares to sing a verse to the marching, oozing progress of time. Perhaps we're not quite as alone as the knots in the stomach, the thickness in the throat, or the moisture on our eyes tell us. And in time, we relearn connectivity through metal and plastic devices, through the fabric on our faces. We relearn the connectivity of the mind, body, spirit, despite the space-time between. And in time, we relearn to balance ourselves. And as we fall, we throw a hand through the ether of technology and time-space to grasp onto something, someone, a picture, a person, a post, a recipe, to write ourselves, whatever writing ourselves may be. That's all I got. No more strobing lights, promise.
Nice effect, though. That was pretty cool. I noticed how the changing of the lights also had, I believe, an effect on the way I was hearing your story. I'm wondering, my guess is that's intentional, but it was appreciated for sure. The few things that in that story that really resonated with me, this is a partial quote from that, but paying attention to the self not yet written, which is something that I really want to ponder on for a while. I really like that, with the other voices within us, and there are multiple voices within us that are experiencing this collective experience that we're all going through. And it made me think about how my physiology pays attention to that as well, trying to make sense of it. But that all these voices that we're hearing are a part of us. But the main thing that struck me during the whole story was that a sort of a yearning for, I'll call it a recalibration, that this experience that we're all in together against our will, or perhaps less intense than that, it's just something we're going through. Nonetheless, when you made that statement about the fabric across our face, and it did make me realize that I even also am in the middle of this, trying to recalibrate, to make sense of all this. Particularly interesting because there's not making sense of a lot of it, but nonetheless we try. But I just found myself really admiring, through listening to the whole soliloquy there, that it just sort of had re-storying written all over it in the way that I perceived it. And so I'm just finding myself being very appreciative of the work that you did. So thank you for that. Anyone else?
I was actually just really curious, Rachel, what it was that you were maybe grasping for in this time, because that is the part that really stood out to me. And feel free to respond or not respond. Um, and I asked myself what it is that I am holding on to during this time. And I think for me, it was family and just that, I guess, so I was relating to it in that way, that persons and the memories we're creating within the home, that it doesn't, we do what we can in the given space and whatever time this may be. So thank you for that.
Is it okay to offer a response? Yeah, so there are, I guess, multiple answers as to what I'm holding closely at this time. But when I found myself devoting some time and thought space to writing, I was reflecting a lot on this characteristic of time that has been echoed by many people and perspectives in my clinical work and in my personal life, that there's something surreal about what's going on right now, that there is this perceived sense that there's this individual impact and reaction to what's going on, but also perceived global effect. And I was kind of trying to capture that surreal quality of time that's intentionally hard to pin down, and what we do with that, and more so the time that we spend in our own heads and what we hear when we're in there, especially with everything that's going on.
Thank you all. Share some of there was so much. I think your words, Rachel, made my imagination travel so many different places, and also engaged by the tones of the lights. So it was a little bit of going in and out between the text and the sense of the light. So I appreciate that. So I love the poetics, of course, and I think at one piece you alluded to the idea of hope having a voice. So not hope, not as a message in text or an idea, but hope as the possibility to utter or to give, to express a voice. And that just grabbed me, right? So what are the messages? But it's not only the messages that are being shared, like the most radical example here, this 24-hour wave, but the hopes that we are identifying, or how can we identify the hopes in our everyday life now under living a home shelter life. And also you talked about itching ears. So like the coming together of voices of hope, but also having the ability to listen carefully to what are the messages of hope that are being evoked richly, even though it feels that we're static in time and space. Also, so just very quickly also, the ideas throughout your sharing, I started thinking about, you mentioned time and space, right? And I think that also how we're rethinking time and space, and when we're in community and when we feel isolation, but when we're accompanying with a sense of time and space, also that also led me to consider that in different ways. Because I think we're being, especially space, right? It's being, we have been taking it for granted. We go and come, but now we're really confronted by what does it mean to be part of a space, right? Yeah, thank you very much. That was beautiful. And yeah.
Hi, Rachel. If I could just share that I'm feeling like a lot of buzzing in my chest and my rib cage as you were speaking. It brought to mind a lot of tension I've held with my own relationship with time. And so my physiology was certainly responding to the way that you were expressing yourself. And in this moment, it's feeling very energized and full and enriched. And so I thank you for that. And it leaves me feeling, if I could borrow your words, not so alone as the knots in our stomach. I really loved the way that was worded. And I'll be holding on to your story as just a statement about that connectivity of mind, body, spirit, and a relearning of connectivity. That all rings very true to me. So thanks for sharing.
I was thinking about time and the differences in how, for example, La Cultura Zapoteca and other cultures perhaps conceptualize it a bit differently, perhaps in a way that's less linear, a way less embedded in the fast-pacedness of productivity and development. I think it questions that which has been unquestionable until now to an extent, because we have known it to be as fact. And I think with this, we begin to question time differently. And I definitely appreciate your story and your words in terms of kind of the different caminitos or different pathways it opened up for me. Thank you.
Is it okay for us to shift? Okay. So now I'd like to introduce our next storyteller. So Ellie is a second-year student at the MFD program at San Diego State University, where she will be continuing her training in the summer at the Narrative Initiative San Diego. Ellie also uses she, her pronouns and identifies as somewhere between first and second generation Asian American. I'm really honored to introduce Ellie today because she is, as I know, very beautiful and gentle soul and very thoughtful. And today, Ellie will be sharing her experience with imagination as a way of taking care and staying connected in a COVID-infused reality. Take it away, Ellie.
Okay. Thanks for that introduction, Christina. And hi, everyone. I've been feeling really thankful to witness other stories and be a part of something like this. And in thinking about my hopes for joining this wave, I wanted to share a bit about my relationship with imagination, because it's been really meaningful and helpful for a long while, but especially as of lately. So I'm hoping it fits in here and has something to offer. And given the visual space of this presentation, I also wanted to share that something that has been bringing me a lot of calmness lately is watercoloring. So as I speak, I'm gonna kind of shift over to doing a little watercoloring. This is just a physiology of my body that helps me just kind of tune into that place of imagination. So if my screen is looking a little wonky, that's kind of what's going on over here. And so since the shelter at home orders have gone into effect, so has my imagination, which was already a force of her own. And when I use the word imagination and imaginary, I'm referring to these images or visualizations that typically originate somewhere here, like in my brain space. But if I commit to animating the images that come to mind, I can begin to translate them into the physical space around me and interact with them. Kind of like a daydream that becomes so detailed that I can sit in my room and look around and feel like it's happening around me. And that seems really different from closing my eyes and imagining more inwardly, which is something I might have done more when my days required lots of commuting and hustling. And when I'm in this place of a daydreaming or imagining, I could spend hours designing the most sensational and convincing scenes about the things that I miss the most right now, like the posture of leaning over an espresso machine to hear about a customer's day, or the reassurance during class that comes from shared eye contact from a classmate who is just really tuned into my body language and can just sense what I might be thinking in that instant. And so I'm grateful that platforms like Zoom allow for an event like this that helps me maintain some semblance of my learning and my community spaces. And it also has me missing like the silly off-the-cuff exchanges with people who I really wish I could share more than just a virtual space with. And there are nuances and features to how I like to communicate and use language that I just can't quite access right now. Like how a mask conceals the facial expression I might typically rely on as a way to acknowledge someone in a public setting. Not to say that I don't recognize the role of the mask. And when I say I miss some of these things, I mean, I've realized that something is physiologically missing. Like there are certain muscles I'm just not using in the same way or as much because of changes in lifestyle. And that aching sensation can be felt on all levels of how I experience myself. And there's something notable about this practice of imagination and world building that has been quite helpful in giving me more material to work with as I'm trying to grasp the state of the world that's already been built around me. And at times I'm feeling consumed by this rage and disappointments as leaders and news outlets around the globe increasingly feel like unreliable narrators, and I just don't know how to hold or honor this much grief and loss without knowing how much more is on the way. And at the same time, I've also been moved and energized by moments of resilience as I watch my friends and my loved ones and myself navigate these unfamiliar plot lines in what can feel like really scary high-risk territory. And all the while, it's important to me that I try to stay cozy with my imagination and these bizarre, peculiar times, partially because it gives me the experience of feeling grounded in my body in this energetic ease or this stillness, even when imagination comes spontaneously, and that all feels so healthy to me right now. And also because it feels like I'm able to exercise some choice or some creative license and even show myself more compassion in the way that I stay connected when disconnection and isolation are so available and at times really tempting. And giving myself this freedom to be with my thoughts and mental images like this has let me form a new relationship with uncertainty as I wonder about conditions of the world and a world that I want to inhabit and build towards without like feeling restricted to any rules of reality or perceived social norms about what the world should or ought to look like. And I've also noticed less judgment towards myself for the ways that I've been coping and processing the impact of COVID-19 when I might otherwise be up against some ideas about how to stay productive or functional during this time. And as I've been sitting here, I can't help but wonder what the pandemic might have to say if it could only witness these stories and know the impact it's had. And I don't know what it might say, but to me, it just underscores how meaningful it's been to carve out space for privileging the voices or experiences of many people who do have something to share about the impacts they've felt. All to say, I'm getting to know my imagination through the things we've created together and how it's guided my thoughts and feelings and responses. And I just wonder how else I might be surprised by my imagination and what I could learn if I'm open to it. So thanks for listening, everyone. That's all from me.
Thank you, Ellie. That was really beautiful. And I kind of wish that I had my tools to be doing water work as well while I was listening to you. I was wondering if you're complete with your water work.
I will say it is, I won't say anything about it. It started out as a fish. Oh, I guess I'm saying something about it. It started out as a fish. It didn't really end up there, but this is a color that has just been taken on a new form. This red and this pink or fuchsia has been a little activated for me, and suddenly I've been finding a little bit more of a calmness with this shade. So thanks for asking, Christina.
I really appreciated I think this theme that emerged for me that I found myself pulled toward, like figuring out a new way of relating to uncertainty. There's a lot of language around the unfamiliar, like unfamiliar plot lines, not quite trusting or being certain of the narratives being put forth out there by folks in certain power structures, not knowing how much grief to expect. But in that, there is a way to change your relationship with that uncertainty, to kind of hold fast or figure out what to hold fast to in the moment and what's going on here, to translate that imagination to a physical, tangible form. And I wrote here like, oh, this sounds like a divestment of some rules to reality that are now turned on their head. and like question these perhaps taken for granted ways of being in a time before. So thank you so much for sharing what you did, and also showing and modeling that you can story tell and create a space and outlet for your own physiology.
I'll share some thoughts. It's the echo of your expression, Ellie, of getting cozy with your imagination. Like, just hit me like it was a beautiful wave. Because I'm thinking of Tisha's WIDA experiences of being home shelter in response to La Migra. I'm thinking about Rachel's poetics of the flexibility and rethinking time and space. And I'm thinking about what we have is our imagination, right? What we have is our imagination. I mean, in any space, time, like, fuck, it's like the, you talked, Tisha, about resistance. I'm thinking about the home of resistance is our imagination, because we have to imagine the unimaginable in able to proceed, to act, to do something. So I'm gonna take that expression with me, and I love the distinction between your animating images, that the images are coming to life. So it's not like they're not contained within the boundaries of your skull, but the images come to life outwardly, not just only inwardly, as you draw that distinction. And that lead you to act, to I lack that skill of doing any artistic sort of things, but I love the color. I love the idea of water and color. Love my ignorance about art. Just I'm listening to water and color as to to substances coming together to do something. So that was beautiful as well. And so I also took note about your imagination to exercise choices. I'm connecting that to a expression that you use after, choices of freedom. So you make me think about exercising our imagination to bring the voice of hopes alive, to respond to the migra-like COVID that has led us to live home sheltered lives, which is the ongoing pattern of how some of us, even though we used to go in and out our homes, have lived in a way in home shelter lives. So thank you, Ellie, that was beautiful.
Goodness, a number of things came to mind while you were doing that. I was just so taken with the whole notion of just opening the door to expressing your art while you were also expressing an idea. I love the use of your word imagineering. That just, I'm just gonna steal that from you and use it often if it's okay. Thank you, Ellie. Also, in a way of explanation, sometimes for me to absorb something someone else is saying is to sort of internalize it to my own life and think of an example of how it would happen with me in order to fully understand it, so that I can make it more visceral with myself. And I was just so taken with expressing art and expressing articulation at the same time, and the sort of merging between a left and right brain, and allowing both sides of our brain to have expression simultaneously. And I was reminded me, because I kind of tend to depend on logical trains of thought. I get stuck in reason too much. And I know with me, sometimes if I need to jar myself out of that, I have the privilege of owning a Harley, which I love to ride. And it doesn't take a lot of logical knowledge to ride a motorcycle. It's more, at least to me, is more an artistic expression of how you execute turns or ride into the wind or absorb the art of nature around you when you're riding out in the backcountry and so on. And I find that when I'm having difficulty coming to conclusions about conceptual things, theoretical things that I can't think through fully, I get on my bike and I ride and they make sense. And I've just begun to realize that it's the merging of this side and this side that help it to be more understandable. And so I'm very grateful for your expression of articulation and artwork at the same time. And I just really found myself being curious. I would love sometime to hear you express a story without and then with art. And I wonder how it would differ, if at all. Probably it would, I would think. And I don't know, it just made me really curious about that. But I really appreciated it. Thank you.
I think to me, I really connected and resonated with the story because I'm somebody who thinks in images. To me, like the idea of externalizing or metaphors is not really something that I align myself with. When I say that I find myself, for example, playing amongst the clouds, it is not figurative. It is the languaging of my experience. And as I understood Ellie when she said that it is a way to bring the reality of the imagination from the otherworldly into this world as an act of translation. And I really resonated with that. And I really appreciated you sharing with us your watercolor as well. Thank you. Which is, again, kind of going with what Marcela was saying, the collaboration, the coming together of water and color. Thank you.
I can attest to the fact, in imagination terms, that Tisha lives in the clouds, literally. That's when I came to know you, when you became Tisha. I appreciate that. Any other reflections? Because I'm seeing now Steve, which is sign of it's coming to the end. So any final reflections before the next wave?
Yeah. I just wanted to thank our storytellers because from hearing about the intergenerational story with the time space in combination with like the imagination and creativity, I was just reflecting on what kinds of, I guess, things are possible in combination of that in honoring our ancestors and family members and ourselves, and in this what I would call weird time space with the whole COVID going on, and what really like being not only being able to imagine but actually put into place, using that imagination to be able to put together things that you could carry forward, that could be passed onward to the next generation and such. So thank you all for this wonderful time and for your lovely and beautiful stories.
Well, thank you, everybody. It was so great connecting with you, even though we're just a couple of miles away from one another. So it's great to connect with you, that we're in the neighbor, and with folks that are from other geographical spaces.
Can I share something? Is that okay? First, just gracias, thank you. But where you took me is, it was 28 years ago, I met narrative therapy in my MFT course. And so I'm, I guess maybe without having, it sort of snuck up on me, but I'm an MFT elder, I guess we could say. And to witness this next generation of MFTs is just incredibly heartening to me. I've had ambivalence about my MFT identity. I don't anymore after this. So thank you for that. It's quite a gift.